Welcome to the best 9:30 session there is. You all made the right choice being here.
All right, I'm Robin Sutherland. I am Vice President of Clinical Operations and HR. You'll never hear that title again, but in a small emerging company, when you have more than one set of skills, they force you to use them. So here I am today. James?
James Hendrick, Senior VP at Obvio Health. I've been with the company almost 6 years now and have played a role in operationalizing over 50 DCT and hybrid studies that we've run. So happy to share our insights on this specific case study.
All right, so Renovia was founded in early 2017 in order to help women in innovative ways with pelvic health disorders. So specifically, our first goal was to treat effectively women with urinary incontinence. So we have an FDA-cleared device for stress mixed urge urinary incontinence as well as fecal incontinence.
And for those of you who might not be aware of Obvio Health, let me give you a quick introduction. So we call ourselves a VRO. It's a spin on the classic CRO moniker. And under one umbrella, we have an in-house DCT technology platform. We complement that with boutique CRO services. And we also operate a small virtual site team consisting of a medical director and some patient support coordinators who fulfill some of the traditional site-based legacy functions in more of a telehealth delivery format, complementing physical sites when a hybrid scenario is ideal as well.
All right, so Renovia wanted to prove to the world that we were much better treating urinary incontinence at home than traditional pelvic floor muscle exercises. We had a mandate to prove that before we had to raise funds in May 2021. So we realized that we had to have a pretty robust RCT. To do that, we wanted to power it with about 350 women. How were we going to do that? So we wanted to test the efficacy. We needed 8 weeks in order to be sure that women had a chance to benefit from our technology. However, in your typical clinical trial at academic medical centers, you're happy with 2 enrolled patients a week often. So to get our scale, we suddenly realized we had to go from our typical 4 to 5 sites to about 15 or 20, and then me kind of beating on them to please, you're only down to 3/4 of an FTE per week average. How do we get there? So it occurred to us if we maybe try a hybrid model, some academic medical center, some fully virtual, maybe we can do something. And then COVID hit. January 2020, we started to get worried. We decided to take a risk and go fully virtual. We also knew that we were going to be working with older women, older being my generation, 50 and up, but that's what the demographic is where it really clusters for UI. So in order to do that, we knew that how would we approach them if they weren't going to come out during COVID? We knew that site-based might not be an option because we already had some heads up that academic medical research sites were going to be closing because they weren't essential. And then so we explored the DCT option with Obvio and others. But we did have some initial concerns. So when you think about technology and academic medical centers, often those principal investigators aren't cutting edge. They really want something that's tried and true. Their reputation is on the line. We worried about whether or not women would be able to understand both how to work with an app for the device and an app for all of the data capture. Recruitment, how would it work effectively if it's fully virtual, and how can we be sure we get the quality of patient that we need? E-consent, yes, you can do it virtually. People have been doing that a long time, but often women want to ask questions, and if it's virtual, how can we get that done? Again, people were always focused on older women. I said, I'm really technologically savvy. My 20 and 30-year-old colleagues were concerned. Patient engagement, how does it work when it's fully virtual? Do you have that same commitment from patients to continue the study? And then safety, how would we track and deal with AEs and SAEs, God forbid? All right.
And so despite all of those concerns, I think we were still bullish on the DCT model, just knowing that this was an opportunity to really bring a more convenient experience for this specific demographic. So 60% of women and 10% of men suffer from some level of UI. If I close my eyes and ask this room to raise your hands nice and tall if you have urinary incontinence, I don't think we're going to get too many hands up. It's a little bit of a taboo issue. And so we really saw the advantage of potentially shifting that care to an at-home model and also accommodating women's busy lifestyles to make this more of a seamless experience in their day-to-day.
All right, so we decided to go ahead, take the risk, jump in, and work to create the first fully virtual study within urinary UI with urogynecologists.
Frozen. And so to walk you through a little bit of the methodology, some of you might be familiar with this, but what this funnel represents is essentially the marketing laws of physics for enrolling a patient into a clinical study via social media, which was our predominant approach here. So we have an in-house marketing team. They put together a fairly robust set of advertising materials in advance to take those to the central IRB. We also complemented that with a landing page that acted as a nice educational asset to introduce the study and also serve as an initial pre-screener with kind of just the right amount of information to ensure we're finding the initial candidates who are going to be eligible there. And then knowing we had quite a wide age range and different demographics, we really tried to put together different sets of imagery, and we're sharing some of the best performers on the screen here now. So in the younger demographic where the disease is much less prevalent, we did more tech-forward type of imagery and calls to action. The middle demographic, more of an added value to enhance lifestyle, kind of get back to the previous lifestyle. And then with the older, the underwear on the clothesline really resonated. So you see some of the cost per click numbers below and the click-through rate. If you're a digital marketer, anything above 1.5% is a fantastic click-through rate. So we were happy to see this level of volume and got over 6,000 responses on the campaign here. And then, we did use a BYOD approach to this study. So those who are initially eligible to participate in the study were given a link to download an Android or iOS version of the study app. And we used this as an opportunity to collect the relevant screening information on the front end. All of this is complemented by our virtual site team. So we've got a medical director and a handful of patient coordinators working proactively to kind of deal with most of the heavy lifting and add value where they can and kind of complement the clinicians from Robin's group that made some of the more nuanced medical assessments during the study.
All right, so because we needed this to be pretty bulletproof and we were going to look to publish the results because we wanted insurance reimbursement, and they look for an RCT for that. We had two parts of screening. So first, they had to go into the Obvio Health app and put in all of their medical history and demographic information. We had a medical director from Kaiser Permanente in California review that to be sure they were fully qualified. Then they were invited to participate in a 3-day Bladder Diary, and that is when University of Alabama at Birmingham decided to take a look and who could be enrolled or not. Once they were enrolled, that's when University of Alabama at Birmingham, as well as the University of New Mexico Clinical Research Team, took over. For that, they gave each of the participants 3 phone calls. They answered any questions. It was all very tightly scripted so that coaching wouldn't be the differentiator in results. And they also helped them with their training. In terms of training, because again, these academic researchers wanted to be sure that we were doing something for all patients, it was an active control group. So the active control group were trained in how to do Kegel or pelvic floor muscle exercises through a video and through a handout that the American Urogynecology Association put together. And then again, they had those 3 onboarding calls with the clinical research nurses. In terms of data capture, we had to create, again, those 2 apps, and one was for Bladder Diary, and most people bring their phone into the ladies' room or their home bathroom, so we encouraged them to go ahead and do that so that they could capture in real time what was happening, any leaks, volume, and all of that was tracked by the site because we needed it to be accurate. So if you had more than 14 bathroom trips, something's wrong. You're probably needing to see a physician, not be in the study. If you had 2, then something's not quite right. You're dehydrated. Please go see your physician. And anytime there was something of concern, it was elevated to the Obvio Health Medical Director. And if any concern from there was considered significant, it went right to Mass General. And that's when Elena Weinstein got involved. So in terms of a bladder diary, we covered everything that you might see in a bladder diary: how much they drank, frequency, senses of urgency, difficulty emptying their bladder, was it stress or mixed? We were able to get that. How bothered were they? Because that's really when women seek care. So we were trying to make sure that only women who were of care-seeking level of concern were in the study. So again, we weren't going to have a lot of controversy around our outcomes. And then we also tracked pelvic organ prolapse and fecal incontinence, any bowel symptoms, because we knew we were looking to expand our indications.
And now on to the good news. So number one, closing the loop here on the successful recruitment, we did have over 6,000 responses, 350 individuals enrolled in 14 weeks. We're very happy with that. I think several times during the study, we actually throttled back recruitment so as not to overwhelm the humans making the training calls. That was indeed the actual bottleneck there, which is always a fantastic scenario. And happy to be transparent on the costs as well. We ended up with a $67 cost per participant enrolled. That's not consented, that's actually enrolled, which we were quite thrilled with on that time frame as well. And we're seeing 600 to 2,000 or more comparable quotes in a site-based model. So touching on diversity, without any undue influence or objective on our part to sway this one way or another, we did have a fairly diverse 20% sample of Black, Native American, and Hispanic participants, above the census values. We had 22% of the population was 65 and older, and I know you're all on the edge of your seat trying to figure out what the compliance rates are going to be for that population. Oldest was 82, and the mean was 51.
And so let me just add a couple more things here because I think it's important. So $67 per enrolled patient, that's mind-blowing. I never thought that we could be so low. As a matter of fact, it was so low that we cost shared with Obvio Health. They gave us some money back and they got to keep some profit because 67 is amazing. We also really wanted to try and target some underserved populations. And so we had Obvio sometimes zero in on specific zip codes. So for example, we wanted to be able to eventually go for Medicare coverage. That means 65 plus. So at one point we were lagging. So if any of you know American senior citizens, there's a place called The Villages in Orlando. That's crazy. And so we targeted them for quite a while. And we targeted another similar population in Pennsylvania. But we knew we had certain goals we wanted to meet, and they were really flexible, allowing me to help drive some of that.
And on the engagement side, I think the virtual site team ultimately ended up being the secret sauce for this study. So we used them to maintain continuous contact via phone call and also a 24/7 chat function availability on everyday questions around consenting, how to use the app, day-to-day tech support. We had a few issues with device batteries, for example, on the Leave It device that we needed to expedite replacement shipments for overnight, and also being able to monitor adherence. If you've got a patient who's normally adherent, but then you see them kind of go dark on you for a few days, we can reach out, touch base, make sure everything's okay, and give a gentle nudge and course correct as necessary there as well.
And the nudge was simply, we just want to be sure your device is working. We weren't saying, remember, you committed to 2 times a day. It was just, is your device working? We noticed it hasn't been online for 2 days. And then in terms of the huddle, so, we, as Renovia, knew all the ins and outs of this device and what to look for in the database that could suggest something was happening. Did they accidentally break the device? Did they never put it in its case and the battery drained? So 15 minutes a day, the Obvio Health team and a few of us from Renovia literally huddled every single day, and on a spreadsheet, we went through any issues. And after the first month, it was 5 minutes a day, and eventually it was twice a week. But it was wonderful to be able to protect the patient privacy, but still be sure that they were getting the service that they needed.
And then touching on the completion rates, we promised them, here they are. In the under 65 demographic, we had a nice 88% completion rate. I think very few of these were lost to follow-up. Most were withdrawn early in the study for quite rational reasons. And then in the over 65 population, same story, 91% rate over an 8-week study, including additional couple weeks of screening there. So we were really happy to see that level of engagement.
And what's not on these slides is that we're already now collecting 24-month data, but when we looked at our 6-month and our 12-month data, there wasn't much fall off at all. 18 months, it's about 50% compliance. So we're still kind of happy because no one's touching them. No one's reaching out to them. They're not getting any reminders. So we're pretty happy with that.
And again, I think we contribute this to the coach team. This is not just tech for the sake of tech. We put together the right balance of technology convenience and the perceived anonymity of participating in a DCT, but also giving the hand-holding to the patients that did want it. We all know some patients just want to talk to a human, and we're happy to kind of give both sides of the coin there and let them create their own experience as needed. And then your favorite results.
Exactly. So what's really nice is that we were truly better than just the sheet of paper that most patients receive when they're telling their physician they have urinary incontinence. And we know that the drop-off rates for PT, most don't even complete 3 sessions. So we were really happy to see that not only did they do the exercises, both the pelvic floor group and pelvic floor muscle group, as well as LEVA group, but we were better, and you don't always see that. So we were really very happy about that. And the study, while it may not seem as cutting edge today as it was a year ago, we did receive a national award for that. The Medical Device Network gave us the Excellent Award for the design of our RCT. So we're really very pleased with that. But there's always opportunities for improvement, and DCTs may be a little bit more commonplace now, but there's lots of opportunities to have a negative readout just because of some, not considering something like the font size and the figure ground discrimination challenges within an app. The Bladder Diary, we had some issues there initially that Obvio Health was able to jump on and resolve within 2 weeks, which is that everything was in GMT, not Eastern or Central or Pacific Standard Time. And so it was throwing off some of the frequency rates, and the data was messed up. So they cleared that up in 2 weeks. And then what we would have loved to have had is video, which now Obvio Health does have that in their app, so that you can see somebody eye to eye as though you were just on your phone in a Zoom or a Teams meeting or whatever other technology you use. But we did have to work through that. It took us maybe 3 months from the initial looking at their Claim It app until we launched, so that everything could be right for the patient. And we didn't get a negative readout. So what I will say is that when you look at digital recruitment, which again, you can target it, and our digital recruitment was more expensive because we were doing it over an election cycle and the holiday shopping period. But it's really able to reach women, and the word of mouth was great, and we could see, who was sharing it. The user-friendly app was absolutely critical, both the one that Obvio provided for data collection as well as ours. And I will say the virtual site team, we could not have done it without them. When I compare our completion rates on this study versus one of my clinical sites with a fecal incontinence study, that was a 50% dropout. And you saw the very high completion rates with this study. It's all because their clinical team was on the phone monitoring with patients or sending them text messages or emails. It was really quite exciting for us. All right, so now you get to ask your questions.
I was wondering, the app from Obvio Health, did you have experience in previous trials with them, or was this the first time for you? Can you tell us a little bit about how that went? What kind of hurdles did you encounter when you, they have different language probably than you do, how did you get from contacting them to really implementing it?
So as a small company, a small emerging digital health company. We had a really, really tight budget. And so I needed to look at budget and timeline. So I talked to everybody who was saying that they could do digital health at the time. There were some very large players in the industry who the cost of the study would have been 3 times greater. And their timelines to get an app ready for me were 6 to 9 months, whereas with Obvio, and granted, I think they had a dartboard with my face on it for a while, but we did it in 3 months. I mean, I'm a little bit funny and nice, except I needed to get this done, so we had to drive hard. And they truly had a partnership mentality. So while their app, the way it was originally shown to me, was not what I could do. I couldn't make that work because older women, and again, there were some in their 20s, 30s, but they skewed 50 to 80. I needed them to have larger font. I needed them to set things up differently. And while it might not have been their first choice to do that level of work with me, they absolutely did it. And they did it superbly. And I needed a true partner. So I like to say that they were small enough to really know us and we were big enough to matter to them, but they were also large enough to get our needs met. So that's why we worked together. And I would say, I mean, you didn't have to work with me initially, but their COO sure did. And, we would go like, Maddie, I need this. I have to have this. Can't have a negative readout. I need the font larger. I need this. And she met me and she did it. She did it. And again, I think at this point I'm off the dartboard, but it was a labor of love. Most companies weren't willing to be that flexible with us, and I needed it to be. I am a little high maintenance, but not terribly, just initially.
Still like each other enough to show up here together.
That sounds great. Did you also do a test run, or did you just do a UBT and then go live? Or
So, as Renovia, we had been developing apps for our patients anyway, and we did a lot of marketing research with patients. So, as we were developing our second generation Leva that you had seen on the screen and the app, we had lots of feedback. So, I knew what would or wouldn't work based upon our own app, which is how, when you think about validated and standardized surveys, you don't want everything to be so close that they accidentally have the wrong checkbox or they do no when it should have been yes. And so that's where we had to customize. And that's where I'm a clinician, I'm an OT by training. And we had a urogynecologist. And the two of us, Mandy and I, we just really partnered with them to get it to what we needed it to be.
super, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Oh, right there.
Hi, thanks for that. I arrived a little late, and apologies for coming in
Don't worry.
late, but I'm glad I came. But what phase was this study?
Technically, phase 4. It was already an FDA-cleared
Okay.
device, but we wanted to prove efficacy.
Okay. So,
We hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, so we were wanting to do that.
and is the intention that you think to try and look at getting involved in registration trials with this approach?
I think this is a great approach to registration trials, and we did it because we wanted, number one, investors to raise a D round or a C round at that time, and we wanted reimbursement from insurance companies. And in the US, most insurers are looking for a randomized controlled trial before they'll pay, and it has to be a published study.
Yeah.
And so that's why we decided to go ahead and spend some money doing this.
Yeah, makes sense, because I think that is a hill we have to get over collectively. And just one more thing, that was a US-only study that you were working on.
It was.
Given where we are, what's the challenges that you foresee going outside the US?
Yeah, so I don't see a lot of challenges going outside the US. It was a financial constraint. So when you're emerging, you have to make decisions about where to put your cash because your burn rate determines whether you survive or you don't, right? Or to the next round. And so for us, we didn't want to get distracted, but we have talked to a number of folks who would like to license Leva outside of the US. But again, as a small team at our peak 58 people, we had to be really, and that was including commercial folks, we had to be really strategic with how we used our pennies.
Hi, my name is Jackie. I think in all the studies that are conducted, I find that no one's ever mentioned the lack of diversity in terms of socioeconomic. So usually studies just have like a plain field. there is not much in socioeconomic and diversity, and that's what I'm really interested in.
So,
So how do you deal with that?
yeah, so initially we were finding our demographics were skewing very Caucasian. And especially when we have run our studies with academic medical centers, it can be very expensive to commute in, or they take 3 buses and they don't want to do it, or parking is $40 US, which is the same basically as euros now. And so we thought that this would be a way to be able to move our demographics a bit. I wish we had had another month or two to recruit. We did get over 20% of underserved populations, but some of those folks, some of the challenges were, for example, in New Mexico, there's lots of mountains and they don't get strong cell signal, so they couldn't use the app the same way, and they might not have home Wi-Fi to connect to either. So some of that was our challenge. Next study, we'll do things a little bit differently, and we might also have not only a handheld, but maybe a laptop or computer-based, so that women could theoretically go to the library and put in their data, paper, and then transfer it, but we had time constraints.
It is a challenge, though, and we've done other studies, for food products and others intended for kind of lower SES individuals, and you try to ask that, and it's something people don't love self-reporting, or they'll maybe give you an inflated answer. So I think just trying to be upfront as to why we're ultimately asking for that information. We're not trying to sell anybody anything. Could go a long way as well.
I'm just very concerned that, we are making, we're running clinical trials, and we're, potentially bringing out products that is affecting everyone in the society. And some group in society are underrepresented in these
agree.
clinical trials, and they are going to be consumers to these products. So that is my concern at the moment when clinical trials are being run, and I always ask that question.
I've seen a number of organizations, even Walgreens, hire a head of diversity, equity, and inclusion to help drive patient recruitment in underserved populations. So I think that's becoming more prevalent in the past 1 to 2 years than it was earlier. But it's still an underrepresentation. It might take years for it to catch up. But I think that some companies are doing the right thing by doing that.
Yeah, hi. I just have a very quick question. You were saying that with regards to adherence, you were giving them a gentle nudge. We're all working with devices, and it's bing, bing all the time. Remember to do this, do this. What were your considerations for these nudges?
Right. So we had originally done a proof of concept study on the device to be sure it was worth more than $8 million in seed money. And I was the coach. And so people did phenomenally well, but I have a big personality, and you're not going to want to come and meet me, and you didn't do your exercises. So we knew we had to take me out of the equation, and we had to make sure it was all in the app. And so the app would remind them to fill in their information, but for both sides. So it was equal. The nudge was only that if we didn't see the device working for a couple of days, that's when James' team would reach out to make sure that there wasn't a device malfunction. But they also filled out surveys pretty routinely. So to some extent, that served as a reminder to both sides as well to do their exercises. But we asked them to self-report their adherence. And, what we see on data when they actually used our device versus their self-report, well, it was 100%. Of course, I did it twice a day. And the app shows I did it about, 56% of the time. And with pelvic floor muscle exercises, you'll never know. It's 100% self-report, but they all said they did it. Because if they said they did it, even if they said they didn't do it, but they answered the question, it was $50 for part of their screening packets or their progression packets. So, you do the best you can, but we didn't nudge. We didn't say, remember, you said you do this. It was just more, your device hasn't been online.
How many times or any budget spending on the UX? Because UX design is going to be more popular in our industry as well.
So US or UX?
UX.
UX, user experience.
Yeah. Font is just the basic things that you should probably consider before. Because that's why I'm asking how much
Yeah.
time you spend on before you planning the
So we ran as Renovia about 3 studies. And it probably, the studies were maybe 200,000, and then working with our app designer, that was actually much more expensive. So it was probably about $1 million in spend before we entered the clinical study. And we stripped out most of what the commercial patients would get. So that, again, all the coaching and education that our commercial patients get wouldn't be part of the app. So there was a balanced approach. But I don't know if you can speak to some of that with the Claim It app.
I mean, if you're asking if there was any cost associated with kind of reconfiguring some of that, the answer was no. I mean, I think we just
Not
took
to
some
me.
of the
There was no cost to
valuable
me.
learnings from you investing that $1 million on what worked well and making sure we had the font size right, so nobody needed their reading glasses. So it was just kind of a preference to get the one question per screen and make sure we made that big enough for everybody to be happy.
Going? One more chance? Okay.
Yeah, so on the recruitment. The recruitment, did you, if I understand well, you did it yourself, right? Your company did it
They
yourself.
ran it for us.
Oh, of your health did
Yes.
it? Yeah, okay. So you have experience with that, you have it, okay, that's all right, okay, yeah.
And it's funny that you asked that, because I would have approached some of the recruitment very differently, and I was so skeptical. I didn't like the graphics they were using, the granny bloomers on the clothesline. I didn't like so much of it, but that's what they specialize in. So I had to be quiet and I'm not sure I was totally quiet, but I had to give them the benefit of the doubt to see if what they were proposing worked or not. It did work. So they really are experts in this space. It was phenomenal how quickly they were able to target women using social media and the right demographic. And really, when he mentioned I had to pull back the throttle, I did, because all of a sudden there were just too many women entering at one time. And I would have to call his counterpart and say, please stop running ads for the next 3 days. We've got to catch up. We have to catch up. So I was blown away. And I'm not easily blown away. Okay. All right, it looks like we're done. Thank you all. You've been a great audience.